Oh, hey. Okay, now you can probably hear me, right?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. So what got you interested in web development?
It's basically something that I started doing while working in my last company. I don't do the coding part. I was involved in the revamping of the WordPress website through Elementor, and now I'm creating a website on Wix. So that really just got me intrigued into the whole idea of creating the website and the design elements.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've worked quite a bit with WordPress as well.
Oh,
I used to make websites for small businesses, and then I would use that as well. It's a good tool.
Yeah. So which tool do you use? I'm sorry.
Usually these days I would use C# and Angular in a company context.
Okay.
But for like smaller businesses or websites that don't have as much traffic or inter-department apps, I would probably you could probably use WordPress if it already has the functionality there and it's so much faster. It'll save you a lot of headache. Why rebuild the wheel when you don't have to, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I guess we'll get started. Other people might come in a little bit later, but I'll share my screen.
First, I would like to thank you for organizing this, this session.
Oh, okay, it's no problem.
So I'm excited about it.
I'm trying to increase the amount of, well, you'll see in a minute. Okay. This is the first time I'm actually giving this from home. I usually do this from the library.
Oh, okay.
So I need to share my screen. Share. Okay, so introduction to web development for non-programmers.
Yeah.
Okay, so while you're programming, and especially while you're learning, my suggestion, and a lot of people might disagree with this, is just experiment and explore and get used to the syntax, and making mistakes is okay. Because we'll be doing few hands-on activities in this. It won't be that complicated. Okay. It'll just be more introductory. Furthermore, move fast, make the mistakes and learn, because web development is very hands-on, and start with one page, right? And then move on and get more complicated. And as you go through the motions, you will learn it. In the past, most web developers didn't learn this in school. Only more recently have these programs started popping up. Don't get discouraged if you run into an issue or don't get something at first. There will be things you get and don't get. Ask questions, get clarification, and that's why I'm here. And there are a lot of other resources that will be shown later on. You don't need a degree or need to be a genius to code. You just need discipline, persistence, and resilience to learn the things you got to do, right? So what's this meetup about? The purpose of this group is to create a knowledge sharing and enhancement avenue for people interested in technology through hands-on exercises and tutorship and anything technical. This includes hardware, software, and security. We also provide an avenue for networking amongst professionals and companies. We'll have live meetups later on as the group grows and develops. So let's introduce ourselves. So who are you? You can say something interesting about yourself, and you already mentioned why you're interested in web design, but where are you coming from? Like, what did you study in school, and um, what do you do for work, etc.?
So I come from a marketing background. I did my master's in marketing,
Okay.
and I was working with this startup, fintech startup, where I was helping them build their social media strategies and online presence, also the content piece.
Okay, cool. I could probably learn stuff from you because I'm actually trying to market some stuff on some of my projects that I have on the side, and I
Oh,
have been having a little bit of problems. Hi,
oh,
hi. Yeah.
that's
So
yeah,
maybe I'll reach out to you after this.
for
Right.
sure.
I've been unsuccessfully using Google Ads and stuff.
Oh,
Hey, Scene. How's it going? Do you want to introduce yourself? Could you hear me? I'm not sure if your mic's working or not. Might be having technical difficulties. So for an intro, you could say something about yourself and why you're interested in web design, what you do for work, and what you studied in school. Maybe he has a chat problem. I can hear you, but you can't seem to hear me. Okay, that's fine. Okay, well, we'll just continue for now. But I'm glad to see you here. Okay, that's cool. Okay. Okay, so I guess he's having mic problems, so we'll just continue.
sure.
So here's a fun fact. Back in 1995, there were only 25,000 websites, and today there are over 300 million. So that's just an example of how fast the internet is growing. So what is a website? Like when you think of a website, what is it to you? So I guess, do you want to take a shot at it? What is a website?
So website, yeah, it's basically an online face of your product or service that you're offering. It's the first impression, online impression that you can create. So I see it as a place I can visit just to find, just to see how good the business. It's kind of a first impression. I would just leave it there. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it is that, but it's a lot more than that, right?
Yeah.
Because a website, if you remember, the internet's grown exponentially, and there's a reason behind that because of its ability to interconnect different people in different parts of the world instantaneously. So now things like sending emails, which was once manual, like sending mails, you would actually have to have a mail carrier take it to each door individually. Process like that have been streamlined and automated, but it doesn't stop there. Things like accounting, right? You could utilize a website, enter in all your information, and things that used to be manually checked will be automatically checked on the fly. So it reduces the risks of errors. You can use the internet in order to look up live reports. You can watch online videos of not just television shows and movies, but also things like lectures. And a lot of schools are moving in that direction, and a lot of educational platforms have come out. It's really a way to catalog everything. And basically, it's a very powerful thing. A website could even be an application that you run on your computer, right? So so when you think of a website, realize that based on how you use it, it can add value to all processes you run, like and information exchanges between different companies and analyzing lots of information. So it can really give you an edge even in marketing, right? Because you could, with a click of a button, you can buy things and set out ad campaigns because billions of people are using this platform every day. And that's a powerful thing in and of itself. Okay. So who am I? So I got a computer engineering BSc, and worked in computer engineering over 15 years ago. And then I sidetracked to healthcare for a while, but I'm back. I've worked in everything from digital hardware design to business intelligence and web design. What business intelligence is basically databases and analytics. So generating reports and analyzing massive amounts of data. I've built several websites and applications for fun and for work, and I've done a lot of the boot camps that are out there, like Coding Dojo, Hands-On Training Academy, Pluralsight, Udemy, Coursera, and more. I've coded in different capacities, even before I was educated in it. My dad got a computer for us when we were kids, and then I was playing on it. So I actually got exposed to it, programming by my cousin, and then I just carried on from there. I even used it before we had these wireless Wi-Fis, and you'd have to use bulletin board services to connect through your phone line. I like lifting weights, traveling, and learning in technology. Currently, I'm working to start a technical training bootcamp on the side in order to convert people that are either in the field and want to learn a new technology and update their skill sets, or convert into a programming field and get placed. I've worked in a professional capacity with several languages over time, and in a non-professional and educational capacity, I've used even more languages. I was working on like electrical optical switches, which is something behind the internet, but you know how they use light in order to transfer information these days, right? For the internet. I was working on these things in a research lab before they were actually there.
Wow.
I've worked on the David's Tea website platform called Webfoot. They don't actually say it, but it's actually a configurable e-commerce site, casino games, and many other places. Okay, so that's enough about me. How the websites work and how they've changed. I don't know if you've realized this, but the actual internet has been upgraded over time. The reason why you haven't noticed it is because the people that built it have done it behind the scenes, and they've actually made it more functional and taking a lot of the, ironed out a lot of the issues, even though some of them are still there. In the earlier days, computers visiting a website would simply visit it, and then the computer that held the website would do all the work. These days, it's not like that. So your actual computer that you're using to view a website is actually processing some of the information on your side. So they push off that work to you. As time progressed and more people started using the web, highly visited websites began experiencing issues. So if you remember how I said before, in the beginning, like in 1995, only 25,000 websites existed, and now over 300 billion or million do today, right? So with the increased amount of users, problems started arising because a single computer can handle that much traffic. So first they started using more than one web hosting computer, and then they're doing something different now. But I think that's getting too much into the complexities. But you know this, and once you know the basics, you can learn the details in order to compensate for those definitions, but just go one step at a time. Because in most scenarios, you don't have to compensate for loads that high, right? Especially for like company pages or small businesses and stuff, or intra-department applications. So there's still a huge need for smaller websites that, because they could even do the workload and help reduce the amount of work for small departments and several users.
Hi
Okay.
guys, sorry, can you hear me now?
Oh, hey, Sean.
Hi,
yeah,
sorry,
I can hear you now.
Oh, great.
Oh.
Sorry, I had problems with my mic, but it seems like it's working now.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is actually Vitesh. I have no idea why it says Sean. Must have been the account that I created with Meetup or something.
Okay.
But I am currently working as a business analyst in IT, and I've been in that role for about 10 years now. And I come from an engineering background in terms of what I studied at university. And now I'm just looking to build some new skills and maybe potentially move into a new career. I'm thinking about a career change at some point, and I'm quite interested in web development. I guess the goal is to perhaps be able to work as a digital nomad and travel and work remotely,
Oh yeah,
since I've been
that's
stuck in the office my whole life. So
oh yeah, that's the dream, right? And also,
yeah,
but you know what? Honestly, I think that even with a business analyst job, I
mhm,
think that you could. Because I used to do that as well, right?
right,
I don't think it's necessary for you to actually work there. It's just the certain group structure of the company. But I've
yeah,
actually seen setups
yeah,
where people would actually work remotely, and it seems to be moving that direction in some areas. But sometimes they
yeah,
just like the
true.
face-to-face interaction, right?
Yeah, and I do work remotely every now and then from home uh, in my current job, but I'm actually looking for a career change anyway, because I'm a bit sick of the whole business analyst world,
Oh
and I
yeah.
want to I want to actually be able to build something and um, yeah, I guess just build something myself rather than just specify requirements and what the solution should do. I want the actual skills of actually being able to build the solution. So that's why I'm quite interested in learning more about web development to see if it's something that I want to end up pursuing further. So
Okay, awesome. Okay, that's great because like with web development skills or web application skills, you
mhm,
can actually manifest a lot of your ideas into actual tangible products, right?
yeah,
Um, I do have another lecture which we don't go into in this one, which is like a crash course
mhm,
in .NET development, rapid .NET MVC development, in which you could actually build websites very rapidly, which is the key, right? You want to do things fast
yeah,
to minimize the work rather than doing it the long way. Because I made
okay,
that mistake before.
right,
So I posted that on my YouTube channel, so you could take a look if you want. It's in the previous meetup. So
oh,
in like an
okay,
hour,
cool,
you can actually build a data-driven website. So.
yeah, okay, cool,
Um, all right. So before we get started, let's go into a little bit of definition so you could understand the underworking of the internet. It's not important to know these things. However, they will come up as you discuss the internet with people that are a little bit more exposed to it, especially if you're dealing with software engineers and stuff. So it helps to know this so you won't feel confused. So the first thing we're going to, definition we're going to delve into is protocol. Protocol is basically the language programs speak over a network protocol, I mean. So think of it this way. If you're thinking of people, if you meet a guy from China that only speaks Chinese, you'll only be able to communicate with someone that speaks and understands Chinese. This applies to programs as well. So in order for two programs to communicate over a network, they'll have to understand that particular protocol in order to communicate with each other. Websites, for example, use the HTTP protocol. So when your browser requests a website from a particular URL, it's sending an HTTP request. And then the web server that receives that is going to send back a message. Don't worry if you don't understand what that means right now. We're going to take a little bit of a closer look at it in a second. Packet. So if a protocol is the language that programs speak over a network, a packet is a word in a particular language that is sent over the network. So the actual messages that contain information that applications use to communicate would be packeted and then sent over a wire or Wi-Fi signal to your computer, right? IP address. So just like houses have addresses, the internet uses addresses in order to tell other computers where your computer is located. So if we were to actually take a look at what our IP address is, we could type in our command prompt in Windows, IP config/all. And as you can see here, we get a bunch of information. Each of these informations are the different network adapters on my computer, and each of the network adapters has a particular IP address associated with it. as you can see here. So the IP address is an internet address, essentially. And if you look closer, you'll see IP version 6, because there was more than one version of the internet. So there was more than one version of these addressing schemes, because as I said before, the internet was upgraded. And it's a funny...
Sorry, are you sharing your screen on a different screen at the moment?
Oh.
All I can see is the definitions.
Oh, okay, whoops, let me see. My mistake. Let's see how to share the screen. I think I new share. Okay, there we go. Okay,
Yep.
So here, now you can
Great.
see it. Okay.
Thanks.
So if you go to your command prompt, you guys know what command prompt is, and you type in IP config/all, it'll return a list of your network adapters in Windows. If you're using a Mac, you type in if config, so it's if config, and it'll return your IP address as well. And this is basically your address that other computers use in order to know where your computer is on the internet. So you'll have a source IP address and a destination IP address. If you look at the IPv6, it says it's actually IP version 6 because the internet has been upgraded behind the scenes. And you'll also see IP version 4 address, which is all numbers separated by a dots, while the IP version 6 is separated by a colon. The reason why they changed it is because so many people were adopting the internet and so many devices were accessing it that they were actually running out of possible addresses. So they actually had to change the address scheme because they had run out. So that's kind of an interesting story behind this change in format. So, and that's also a testament to how fast it grew. And the machine address. So that's the actual unique hardware number that each network address has. So if we actually look at our command prompt, we'll see physical address. And this is a unique sort of identifier that each wireless or network adapter will have. And it's mapped to an IP address. Okay, so this might be hard to envision, and you might be wondering why I showed this to you. So let's use this program called Wireshark, which I just installed in order to take a look at what is at these actual packets and what is going on behind the scenes when we have applications communicating with each other. This is just a quick thing, and if I can't get it started, we will just skip over it. Seems to be having trouble. This is my old computer. So there we go. Okay, so as you see here, Wireshark opened and I have a list of my network adapters. Click on Wi-Fi and boom. These are all these different lines that show up in the first window are actually different packets that are being sent over the internet. See this UDP protocol? Each of the, as I said before, a packet is a word in the language and a protocol is the language of the packet. So the UDP protocol is actually this video you're watching. So that's actually the frames and the information that's passed to pass over the actual message. So we could actually look at HTTP sites as well. Let's see. So I'll refresh this page. So we'll have, and then we could type in HTTP. We'll pause it. So it didn't capture it, but rather than going too much into that, let's look at the format of the actual packet. As you can see, if we click on a particular packet, we can see the actual information contained within it, and the information that's kept in it. So if you're ever interested in, so if you recall what I said before, protocols are the languages applications use to communicate, and they'll all have a structure like this. So they'll have information contained with it, and oftentimes the different sections will be in English. And you can use that to understand it. So if you're ever interested in seeing what's going on behind the scenes, you could actually open up Wireshark and take a look. But we won't delve that much into it, and I might have just confused you. But just so you know, it's actually sending information, and many times readable information behind the scenes. And then what you see on your screen is a simplified version of it, and there's often additional information in addition to that. So in order to see that information, you can use something called a network sniffer. And we go more into that in Introduction into Network Monitoring, which is another meetup we did. So we can use that to monitor traffic. And this is an example of HTTP packet example. So if you were actually to open up an HTTP packet, you would see the HTML behind it. HTML is the language of the internet that all pages are built in, and which we're going to be learning in just a minute. Okay, so a couple more definitions. Don't worry if you don't get these, but I figured it's important to just expose you to them because they will come up and you might have heard them already. But as you delve in more deeper into web development, they become more important. But in the case of these lectures, they're not. So don't feel overwhelmed because unless you're dealing with higher level programming websites. But let's just delve into this. So what is a network? A network is a bunch of computers that share stuff. Just think of it that way. A subnet is a smaller network that is connected to a bigger network. A client is the receiver of information between two computers that are connected and communicating, and a server is the giver or host of that information or resources. And a database is something that's used to store and persist information. So if you want to enter information on a website and save it, it's stored in something called a database. Books are, but that's a digital database. A database is actually, in its raw definition, is something that stores information. So a book could be a database, but we're looking at digital databases in this case. So anything that stores information is a database, but in terms of computers, some database is something that stores digital information. Okay, so the internet. It's called the World Wide Web for a reason, because computers are on a network, and if you zoom out, it looks like a web. The places where the wires intersect tend to represent waypoints for relaying packets to their appropriate destination. So let's actually get into the important stuff and the stuff that you will be using as you go forward. The basic languages of the web. First came HTML, and then in 1995 came JavaScript, which allows for you to have more interactive ability with a website. And then came CSS in 1996, which allows you to have more graphically nicer websites. We'll only be dealing with HTML today because that's what existed in the beginning. But if you look at the dates, you'll realize the internet actually, the public internet actually isn't that old. It became available to the public in 1992. So to distinguish, another thing we should distinguish is to distinguish a website from a web application. A website contains only text and media, while a web application is an application like PowerPoint, an email application, a search engine. Basically something that's interactive, where you can log into it or enter information and receive results back. Today we're going to be creating a basic website, not a web application. So HTML files. This is the basic file that the internet uses to display information in your browser when you go into a particular page. It's used for structuring data, and it's made up of something called tags. It's a markup language, and HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It does not need to be run from a server or another computer. You can actually create it on your computer, open it up in your browser, and it will display properly. It's the base language understood by the web, and there are different versions of HTML, and they all slightly differ in how they appear in your browser. So just like the internet was upgraded, so was the basic language of the web. So they improved it in order to add functionality over time. And all languages are upgraded over time, and as they learn about the shortcomings and fix them. Okay, so let's get to the first exercise. I suggest you follow along because it will help you get a little bit more versed in how to approach this. This is very beginner, so you might already know how to do this. because it's pretty intuitive. So let's create a file called helloworld.html. You can create it on your desktop. Go to right-click, go to new text document, or new file, and then create it. And then what we're going to do is name it helloworld.html. .html is basically a website file. Now we're going to open it in Notepad. Oops. And we're going to type in the contents of this file, hello world, and save it. Now we'll open it in our browser. As you can see, by just doing that, we got hello world displayed. So this is essentially your first website, a simple website. But the funny thing is that this isn't even properly formatted HTML. It's just raw text. But because raw text is the language of the web and what this information is passed along as, it still appears. The browser is still able to render it. And that is how flexible it is in many cases. But in reality, the format of HTML looks more like this. It'll have something called a doc type, an HTML, a header. And as you can see, if you remember, I said it's markup language. So it has tags. That's basically what a markup language is. So within these angled brackets, it has descriptors, descriptive tags that tells you what part of the page it is, HTML page it is, etc. And these bunch of tags convert into something like this. So this has a lot of meta information in it, and it'll display in your website if you were to put this in an HTML file as this, because these tags help format the information. The current version of HTML is HTML5. So let's delve into the basic parts of an HTML page. The doc type, the HTML tag, the header, the body, and we also have a page title. Okay, so first let's look at what the doc type is. At the very top of all HTML files, you'll have a exclamation mark, doc type, and then the version of the HTML file you're using. The different versions of HTML, as I said before, display differently. They have different standards, and if you were to change that and display certain tags in different browsers, they'll display differently. So by using the same standard and defining it at the top of your document, you could leave it out, but what that could do is actually cause the same website to render differently in different browsers, which you don't want for a good user experience, right? So you should define the actual version of HTML in the doc type. And if you put down HTML, it automatically assumes it's the newest version, which is HTML5. So HTML is HTML5. There are different versions of HTML, and if you want to see the different versions of HTML, you could actually look it up on the internet by a Google search. It's also important to make sure that if you do define the version of HTML used on your website, that is properly formatted. And you could use validator.w3.org in order to determine whether your website's properly validated. The reason for this is because if you have improper HTML on your website, it could also render differently in different browsers or look off. So by properly formatting your HTML to the version you define, it will display across browsers and mobile browsers more smoothly without deviations in what's happening, which could be bad if it hides a button or something that is very critical for a customer interacting with your website. Okay, next tag of importance, the HTML tag. The HTML tag is basically defining where your HTML page starts, HTML content starts and ends. So when you're starting to define the content of your HTML page, you start off with a angled bracket HTML, and then you will close it off with the angled bracket HTML. And everything in between is the information that about your website. The header tag. This section is for specifying information about your page. So this information doesn't actually display in your website, but by using the title tag, you can actually write the information that's displayed in the tab of your website. And you could also specify other meta information that is used by search engines and other tools in order to understand your website a little bit better in the header. The body tag. The body tag contains the actual markup for your page. So this is where the content of your page exists. And in a moment, we're going to be creating it. And within the content of the tag, you have the basic content tags, which are like BR, bold, italics, paragraphs. These are things you should play around with in order to understand them a bit more. We'll be delving a bit into it right now, but I suggest in your spare time, just creating a design, drawing it out on paper, and trying to recreate it on your own, and Googling the different tags if you want to know how to do something in particular. In order to know what the different tags are in HTML, you can go to w3schools.com. I'll be posting that in the meetup link, and then you could actually click on Learn HTML and get a couple of exercises to go from the beginning to end, and it'll show you the actual structure of HTML. It's a very useful website, and not just HTML, the other languages of the webs that were created in order to support it. So as you can see here, we have the line break tag, which is like enter if you were to write in WordPad. You have bold, which will make your text stronger, italics, which slant your text, paragraphs, which you use to create define the different paragraphs, headers, tables, images, links, and more. Okay, so let's look at the comment. In HTML, they have something called a comment, and in most languages they do. They have no functional purpose except to clarify or leave notes in the code. They do nothing. They basically clarify what you're doing to other developers and to you if you were to go back and look at your code in the future. In HTML, in order to leave a comment, it's an angled bracket, exclamation mark, dash, dash, then comment information, and then you would end it with dash, dash, closed angle bracket. ASCII characters. These are also used to write down on your website or display characters you don't have a key for on your keyboard. So if we were to go to ASCII code, ASCII-code.com, you will find a table. And in that table, you will see a bunch of HTML numbers, as you can see here. If you were to put this in your HTML, it would or even put the HTML name in your HTML, it would automatically be converted into this symbol. Note how the HTML code, it starts with an and sign and then has information. So let's actually take a look. If I was to put and quote in my HTML file that we created already, and then we were to open it in our browser, as you can see, a quote displays. So here we have symbols that are actually on our keyboard. But if we go down, suddenly there are symbols that are not on our keyboard, and this is where the usefulness of this happens. So if you want to display a copyright sign or a TM sign, a trademark sign, you can use these HTML codes or symbols in order to display it on your HTML file and simplify your life. Okay, let's continue. And NBSP is another important ASCII symbol, and that's used to create a space, because no matter, you have to remember that the information you enter in on your website is sort of like markup code, right? So if you put in actual spaces in between words, it'll always be interpreted as a single space. So in order to make it interpret as more than one space, you can use the and NDSP semicolon, and then it'll display more than one space for a single space for every one of those symbols you put in. Okay, so let's try it. So the next website we're going to make is a HTML file that looks as follows. It says, "You are amazing," and amazing is bolded, and never forget it. So we're going to create a new file called review.html. Okay, and as you see, I opened it up and it's empty. And we will edit the text in it and type in, "Hello, you are amazing." I don't have the letter N on my keyboard, so I actually had to copy it from a website because that key stopped working. So hello, you are amazing. Okay, and then if you recall, the symbol for making words bold is angle bracket B, closing angle bracket, and to finish off the section that is bold, angle bracket / B, closing angle bracket. Do you guys have any questions? Is this all understandable?
Yeah, no questions so far.
Okay, and then,
pretty clear. Yeah.
Okay, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, and then to define another line, you would type, to go to a new line, you type in BR/, and that would automatically create a new line. And now we want to put in the spaces, NBSP and NBSP, and then save it. And as you can see, the actual text is formatted like we showed in our document right here. So that actual markup helps format the actual text differently. Okay, so next, if you recall and you go to a website, you'll notice that there are a lot of links. So if we go to a particular website on the web and click on something like this, it'll take us to another page. So how are they doing that? And sometimes you might wonder how they're doing something. And what you can do is right-click and type in View Page Source, and you'll actually be able to see all the HTML that the browser is converting to that actual website. So this is actually CSS at the top and the HTML. So these are a bunch of links. That's good, always good to know. So other links to other pages in HTML have the following markup structure. We start with the angle bracket A space href is equal to quotes http semicolon / www.websiteaddress.com semicolon closed angle bracket link text, which is what the actual link says, angle bracket / a closed angle bracket. So by doing this and entering a website address, you'll be able to click on these texts, and it'll take you to the website defined in the ref information. And then we have lists. So if you look at a particular website, let's find a list right now. There we go. We have unordered lists and ordered lists. So ordered lists have a number at the beginning, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and unordered lists have a bullet point. And that's shown as follows. To make an unordered list, you would put in angle bracket UL, closed angle bracket, and then at the end of that unordered list, you have a / UL, closed angle bracket, and each of the elements in that list that have a bullet before it, you would wrap with a angled bracket, LI, closed angle bracket, and then the name. And for ordered list, you would have OL. So if you notice, I said unordered list and ordered list. And this is just the first letters of each of those words. So unordered list, you think of it that way. And this is a list element, LI. Okay, and then we have tables. A table starts with a table, and then for the actual rows in the table, use the TR element. For each of the columns in the table, use the TD element, and the information within the actual table. You could format or add images or do whatever you want to it. That's how a table is structured. That will convert to what is shown on the right. Don't worry if you don't get that right now. Ideally, you learn by doing. Okay, and then iframes. Iframes are something that is used in order to embed another website within your website. They're not as common these days, but they were pretty common back in the past. You can target what page is displayed in the iframe by creating a link. So you can actually specify in the link, this particular attribute target is equal to the name of the iframe. And then it will, rather than that link changing what page is displayed in your browser, it'll change the page that's displayed in the iframe. But it used to be common practice in the past, but I don't see it around that often anymore. It's I believe it's because of a security vulnerability that was exposed, but yeah. And images. If you want to actually display an image in your browser, you'd use the img tag, and then the actual path of that image would be src is equal to quotes http, which is basically the URL of the image path, and you could define the height and the width of that image and display it in your browser. And then path types. You have different types of ways to display a path to an image. You could either, but we're not going to get into that now. So there's the relative path and the absolute path, which is the entire path. And the relative path is from the directory that your actual website is in, that you're viewing right now. And you can actually navigate the actual file directory structure by using dots. But that's not so important right now. It's just good to know. Okay, so we're going to create a website that's a little bit more complex. At the top, it's going to have the following structure. This diagram I'm showing on the right is called a wireframe. A wireframe basically is a drawing of how you want your website to look when you actually implement it. So oftentimes, graphic designers, they'll create the outline and then convert that into an actual HTML page. So it's going to have text on the top. It's going to have a menu, and when we click on the different menu items, it's going to change the page that is shown within the iframe. And we're going to use tables in order to segment the menu from the actual iframe or create different columns. This is an old practice. Now we'd use something called dividers, but don't worry about that now because it's easier to know how things were, learn how things were, and develop that way, and then upgrade your knowledge rather than starting off from how things are today. That way you'll always understand why something goes wrong. Okay, so let's create this page. So open up in Notepad, a text document, and in exercise, dot HTML. We'll open it up with Notepad. And the first thing we're going to do is create the table structure. And if you recall, the table in HTML file always starts off with a doc type. We'll specify HTML. Now we're going to specify the actual content of the HTML page. And to specify the start of that. We type in HTML tag and then the closing HTML tag. So every tag has an opening HTML tag and a closing HTML tag, which has the same name, except it has a slash at the beginning of it. Then we'll define the header tag, and we'll have the body tag. As you do this more often, it'll become more intuitive, but I don't expect you to remember this all right now. But it comes with practice as you type these things out. Then we'll put in a title tag to define what's shown in our tab, and we'll say example. Now for the body, we're going to create a table for the actual content. And we're going to have a row, because each row in the table is specified with this tr and a /tr. And then we're going to specify the columns, which is a td/td. And a td and /td. Okay, so I created this. Do you guys want to give it a shot to try and finish it off and help me along? So how about you tell me what I should do next in order to fill in the different parts of the website that remain? Anyone want to take a shot? Don't be afraid of making mistakes. You learn by making mistakes and fixing them. It's best to be brave about it, because the guy that asks the question and learns from it gets more out of a lesson than the guy that just stays quiet, right? So I suggest you always go ahead and ask questions if you're unsure about something in order to get the most out of it, because you will take that knowledge that you learn from speaking out into your future, right? So you'll never make that mistake again. So go for it.
Yeah, I'll have a go, maybe.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the wireframe. So would it make sense to perhaps put the iframes in first into the relevant row?
Okay, so in the table, I think what you're saying is add an iframe?
Yeah.
So, and then where would the menu go?
So is the menu in the first column?
Yep.
So just trying to remember how this is structured now.
So each row is TR, and we only have one row in this particular table.
Oh, yeah.
And
okay, so the menu would be in that first TD.
Okay. So that would be where the menu would go. And how about the dummy text? Where would that go? So that's at the top.
So it would that be above the table?
Yep, you got it. So this would be the dummy text.
Would you need to put that in a tag, or can it just be dummy text like that?
Well, because the table will automatically create a row for you, because it's a certain type of element called that actually creates another row.
Right.
You don't have to actually define anything, but you could, if you wanted to make sure it goes on another row, you can add the /br, br/, which is a new line break, right? Okay. So that is the actual structure of it. So now we got to fill in the information, because our menu is going to actually have links to other pages. So let's take a couple of pages from this link, why no HTTPS. And this has a couple of websites that are not using the HTTPS, but still using the HTTP protocol. So we'll take these two sites, Baidu and Sohu. Okay, so do you remember how to create a link?
Using anchor tag?
Yep. So if we go back, do you remember how it's structured? You want to give it a shot?
Through a, I'm not, I don't really remember that.
Okay. So let's go back. Because you will extensively use the internet in order to recall how certain tags are used until you have gotten very familiar with it. So actually, let's do what you would use if you didn't know. So we'd be at Google, and we would type in HTML link, right? So let's pretend we didn't know it was called an anchor tag. Okay. So then the first thing that comes up is w3schools.com, and you can see HTML links. So now on this page, we have the format of a link. So, and an example here. So let's copy this example and then post it into our actual website. So this is our first link tag. And we're going to change this actual link to Baidu.com. And then we'll create another link. So what should I do to go to a new line now? So what should I put at the end of that link to create a new line? Do you remember?
No.
So over here we have the line break tag. So that's
line breaker, yeah.
So that's br/. Okay, so let's create a link for this particular website. Next. So we're going to create another link for sohu.com. So help me fill out the actual text that goes around it. So we're going to create another anchor tag. So how would I do that?
So we'll have TD.
TD? No, so the TD, what the TD does is it actually creates the column in a table.
Okay, right.
Okay, so what would the actual anchor tag information be?
So the same as above. Instead of Baidu.com, it would be Sahu.com and everything would be the same.
Yep, you got it. And visit Sohu. And how would I end that off? So if you recall,
if you want to do the next slide.
No, I want to end the link.
End the link.
So the actual text that's going to be displayed in the link is visit Sohu, right? And the first link is going to say visit Baidu. So how would I end this link off?
Just with this / and a.
Yep, you got it. So every tag starts with the actual name and it ends with the slash.
Yeah, / and whatever the name was. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so next, what we got to do is specify the information for our iframe, right? Because we want these links to update the iframe rather than the web page. So if we actually open up our current website in our browser, what will happen when we click on our link is that it's complaining. So do you know what went wrong here?
Can I see that page again? Yeah.
Okay. Could you see what I did wrong?
No, I don't. Should be HTML, like, sorry, not HTML, HTTP, and the entire thing. Yeah.
Yep. So I forgot to put in the protocol. So always remember to put in the protocol of the website.
Okay.
And so now, when we click it, it's taking us to a new website, but we don't want that, right? What we want is to update the iframe in order to update the website that is displayed within our actual iframe rather than the entire page. So here is the format of the actual iframe, and this is how you use a link in order to update that particular iframe. So what information should I add in order to complete this? So how would I change this in order to make it so that it updates the iframe instead of just the entire site? So let me actually pull that up in PowerPoint right here, so you guys can look at it. Okay. I don't know about you, but what I found in my experience doing things is that if I struggle with it a little and actually interact with it and have the issues, I remember it longer.
Yeah.
Okay, so how would I, change this to update this iframe? So what additional text will I actually have to add in to the links as well as the iframe in order to make it so that the links update the iframe?
Do you need to add a target to the links first?
Okay, but how will it know how? Okay, so let's start adding with the target. So I'll add in a target equals quote. Okay, so we added that, but now we have to figure out the actual target name. So what's the name of this iframe?
So could we call the iframe anything we like?
Yep. So what do you want to call it?
My iframe, maybe.
Okay, so we'll create a name. So did I do anything wrong here?
You need to put it in quotes.
Yep. Okay, so now what would I do?
And then would you just put my iframe into the target?
Yep. Okay. And now let's take a look at our new page. So I saved it, I go back and click Baidu, and boom, the actual Baidu page appears in here. And then click Visit Sohu, and the Sohu page appears in here. So basically by doing that, we've created a rough website. Okay. So, but that wasn't enough. So this was basically how websites looked back in pre-1995. So before 1995, you would have essentially text, links, and then sometimes images. That was the entire internet. And then it was upgraded. And then by 1995, they added things like JavaScript and CSS in order to start making it a little bit more interactive. So if you look at these two examples, you'll see this is websites actually from 1995. This is Yahoo in 1995. If you're ever curious of how the websites looked back in the day, there's something called a Wayback Machine, which has archived the entire internet as it has progressed over time. You could click on that and take a look right now.
Wow, that's interesting to see.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
So then let's look at a website. Is there any websites you remember from 1995? Let's go to Yahoo.
Yeah.
Right. So let's take a look at Yahoo today. So this is Yahoo today. And this is the Yahoo of, let's go to, I guess 1997 is when it starts. Does it go back further? I guess I got snapshots from 1996. So we can click on each of these sections and then look at the date calendar. And wherever it has blue, you can click on it. And it'll actually bring up a list of snapshots. And you click on the number or the time that you want to bring up the snapshot from. And it'll show you the website as it looked while it was taking that snapshot. And this is the internet from that day and time. So that's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then came CSS and JavaScript. CSS allowed us to modify the appearance of websites. So if you look at the website we just created, right? It's pretty rough. This isn't like really something you would want to make and display to people. You could do a lot of stuff with it, I still think, like display the basic information of a company and stuff. So this still does have a purpose. However, ideally, if you were displaying a customer-facing website, you'd want to make it look a little bit nicer, right? So because of that, things like CSS came into play in order to make things more graphically appealing. And then JavaScript, because you wanted to be able to interact more with the website. Like if someone clicked on something wrong, you could pop up an alert. You can do computations in the background on the in your browser, like have a calendar app without having to send information to the user. It just added functionality. But we're not going to be getting into that because I think for now that's enough. There'll be other meetups that go into that a little bit more. And on a side note, there are other applications that allow you to create beautiful sites without needing to know how the underlying code works, like Wix and WordPress. I think that you should use these whenever possible. A lot of people like to code things from scratch, but my mentality is don't recreate the wheel. But as of today, and as I've said before, the internet is evolving because you could see it from the Wayback Machine, how much has changed. And that's just how it appears on the front end and what you see. But a lot of the underlying workings of the internet have also changed. So the shortcomings of Wix and WordPress and other online applications, even though they do make your life a lot easier, and I do promote using them, is that for high load websites, as I said, there are complications. And the ways these are structured just can't deal with the actual amount of processing required. A single computer, it has issues, right? So for data entry and interactive applications, I feel that they fall short and the code might get bulky because you're going to have to modify the code in some cases. And for higher level functionality that is pre-built, you will have to pay in some cases, not always, but oftentimes it's negotiable. So you don't have to worry that much about it because it's pretty cheap. And what's more important, money or time, right? So if you could implement what you need to implement quickly with it and the solution exists, I suggest using WordPress. But when it comes to, and there are even applications that could render the HTML for you. So you would format it like in Microsoft Word or something called a WYSIWYG, which stands for what you see is what you get, and it'll generate the HTML without you actually having to deal with the code. But with anything that is auto-generated, there tends to be bulk on the back end. So there will be more information sent about your website on the back end, and it might take more time to process. So the reason why you would actually use or code out your website in this day and age, I think is more so for data entry apps. As I said before, you can use applications in order to validate data. So initially, when you're building websites, the basic website that is very useful is a web form, which we didn't delve into today. But you can actually, on the fly, validate whether the inputs are correct for, let's say, an accounting application or when you're checking customer information and what they're saying is true. And you could check that information on the fly with the click of a button, and it will validate it, and then it'll pass back information telling you whether it's right or wrong instantaneously. And that's the first of the useful programs that you can make, right? Information validator and storing application. And I feel in these cases, it's best to code it out because you could rapidly do that. I have an application. I have a meetup recording because I record these meetups, right? And I post them online that shows you how to actually create one of those applications if you have a little bit of coding knowledge about variables and loops in under an hour. So those today, if you know how to code, could be generated rather quickly. But in most cases, if you want to set up, like, say, an e-commerce store for your company or enter in information for a small business and stuff like that, just use WordPress or Wix, especially if it's free, because it'll save you a lot of time. Okay, and that's all it is for today. I have all the YouTube lectures on my YouTube channel. I suggest you follow it. This one might have been a little bit too basic. I feel like you guys might have been familiar with a lot of this stuff already. But I go into higher, were you? Or did you learn anything new?
I learned so many things because I don't come from a coding background.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did HTML back in school, but this was good and new for me.
Okay, I'm glad. So on my YouTube channel, I actually have lectures that go into more detail. For example, the live meetups are on a playlist that I've done before, and what other people have done before. Some of them are more beginner friendly. Some of them are for more recent technologies like Azure Kubernetes or .NET Core. Other things are for like that might be beginner friendly, are the net and monitoring internet traffic for non-programmers, because it gives you a little bit more in-depth look at what's going on behind the scenes, because we only brushed upon it right now. But if you want to gather relevant information that you could use and protect yourself against other people looking at your information, you should take a look at that. Furthermore, on the playlist, I have a .NET Core online course that's complete for coders. So I'll show you how to build a .NET Core MVC app, a server-side application, rather quickly. If you, I will be adding in additional information. What I'm working on right now is programming for non-programmers, and there are other things like introduction to hacking that is in the works, and MSBI, as well as automated testing and stuff like that. So I suggest you follow, and I will be continuing to do this in the future. If you have any asks of things that I could teach in the future or improvements I can make in order to help you better understand, just ask. I suggest you go and start off by trying to make your own website by following tutorials online, because it'll help expand your information and stuff, and start with one page, right? And then from there, you can go further and further. And if you have any questions, just reach out. I'll be more than happy to help.
For sure.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
No problem. Yeah. So have a great day, guys. I'm always here. I hope you come to the other meetups on other topics. And if you have any suggestions, just suggest them. Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you
Yeah.
for the session. It was really, it was great, very insightful and educating.
Okay,
Yep.
cool.
Yeah, that was great. Good introduction. Thank you.
Okay, see you later. Bye.
See you. Bye.